everybody. Welcome to 2026. All right, so we are live. We're going to be talking today about what are these frustrating symptoms that occur no matter what we're doing, and there's blood sugar that can be at the root of it, that can be causing these frustrating symptoms, and especially this one most frustrating symptom that I hear about all the time. So we're gonna go through that today. So the first thing that I want to talk about though is just asking you, I guess, have you ever wondered why you feel exhausted or foggy? Sometimes people are talking about being irritable or extra irritable, sometimes shaky. Just even they feel just off. They just don't feel like themselves. But when they go to the doctor and they get their labs drawn, everything looks normal, right? So this is what happens all the time. Many women are told everything looks fine while symptoms still persist, and they're really frustrating symptoms. We continue with fatigue, we have cravings, we have mood swings, stubborn weight often share the same root, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And what's really hard about this is that we start to decide that these symptoms are just normal parts of aging, normal parts of hormonal changes, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, menopausal, whatever. And we start to just take them, right? We just start to accept that this is our new normal just because we're in a different age or whatever. But I'm just here to tell you that things can change, things can be different if you understand your body. All right, so today I want to show you how blood sugar impacts your energy, your mood, your hormones, and fat loss, that kind of main frustrating symptom that I hear women talk about all the time. I would say fatigue is one of the other ones. It is probably that most frustrating symptom, but we're going to talk about all of that today. So this is what we're going to decide is like, what is part of your picture? What is the part of this that fits your picture? And we're going to help you discern how to look at the information and then be able to learn to do something with it. All right, so why would blood sugar be the root cause? Okay, so why would that be? You might say to yourself, I'm not diabetic, I don't take insulin, my insulin or my glucose numbers are always normal. Or you might think I'm not old enough, or I eat really clean. How could it be blood sugar? So just simply explaining this about blood sugar and what it affects is pretty astounding as far as how it can impact us even if we're not diagnosed, okay? So blood sugar affects our energy production. So that is going to, of course, affect our energy throughout the day. It affects our brain function. Who here has struggled with moods or with brain fog or, just being forgetful and not being able to remember things as easily or recall things as easily? This can be definitely affected by your blood sugar. What about stress hormones? So our cortisol production, our adrenaline production are affected directly with glucose. I see this all the time. Thyroid signaling. If you have really crazy imbalanced blood sugar and you have some thyroid hormone issues, or you're starting to feel like maybe you're hypothyroid, but of course those labs come back normal, there is definitely a connection between the two. And if your blood sugar is not regulated, you are going to affect your fat storage versus fat burning in your body. So why is this relevant? Should be obvious, right? Why this is relevant for us. Women with hormone shifts will be seeing these effects even more so than when you're not going through those hormonal changes. But again, we start to accept that it's the hormonal changes themselves that are causing these problems. Yes, that does impact things, but sometimes we have to look deeper at that root of what is causing and driving more exaggerated symptoms of hormonal shifts and those kinds of things. It is relevant for people who struggle with thyroid. If you already know you have Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, This is very important for you to understand how blood sugar is a connection between your symptoms and how well your medications work and that kind of thing. And if you are under chronic stress and you're under fueling, i.e., restrictive eating, not eating enough, intermittent fasting too much, too long, that kind of thing, you are going to have issues of blood sugar concerns that will only make all of these other symptoms worse. And even my healthy eaters, right? My people who eat really clean, I'm seeing poor blood sugar, poor insulin, poor A1C levels. They still feel awful because there's something else going on. Even though they're eating well, there's other things affecting their blood sugar, which is affecting many of the other symptoms. So blood sugar issues don't just show up in diabetes or as a diabetic condition, okay? You can have normal labs and still have dysfunctional signaling, which makes your body just not work quite as well. All right, I'm just going to check for comments and make sure I'm not missing anything. I can't always see. So if you have questions, comments, anything like that, make sure to add them in here. I will go back to them. If I don't get to them while we're live here, then I will absolutely answer them after the fact. But make sure that you get your questions answered, or make sure to ask away or comment if any of this resonates with you. I'm just going to take a minute to slide in here and just reintroduce myself. If you haven't been here for a while, if you haven't seen my videos, my trainings before, my name is Tiffany. I'm board certified and licensed nutritionist. I came to this space to help women deal with a lot of these issues that we're talking about today and many others because of my struggle with thyroid cancer and everything that affected. And I was told that everything was normal or there was nothing to do, and I was sort of left to my own devices of just dealing with it and kind of suffering through all of my symptoms. And I was really frustrated, so I found a different way. And for me and for many of the others that I've helped over the last 10, 11 years, it was with nutrition, but from a very different perspective, a more root cause perspective. And blood sugar was one of the first things that I realized was my problem, but I was not diagnosed even pre-diabetic. My blood sugar levels looked amazing on standard lab values, but I was completely imbalanced in my blood sugar and I had horrible symptoms because of it. So that's what we're talking about here today. So again, if you have any questions, make sure to comment below. I will get to them after the training or during whenever I see them, okay? All right, so let's look at common symptoms of blood sugar dysregulation. So as I go through these, I want you to notice patterns, not judge yourself if you do have these symptoms or more than one of the symptoms. These are biological signals. They're not something like that's a failure on your part, not a personal failure. This is very biological. It's your biochemistry, and it can be changed. It can be affected and improved. So afternoon energy crashes. I would say this is super duper common. This is something I see on a regular basis. What's happening, physiologically at your cellular level is that your blood sugar may rise after lunch. That also increases your insulin. Then that causes you to be reactive, and then you drop too quickly. Your blood sugar drops too quickly. But then you send out cortisol and adrenaline to compensate for this. This allows and causes many people to hit the wall between 2 to 4 p.m. This is when we're reaching for caffeine or sugar or something to power us through the end of the day, right? This causes us to kind of go into that caffeine addiction, the sugar addiction. It's just this vicious cycle. And in the end, it doesn't really help us long term. We feel foggy, we feel heavy, we feel unmotivated, we just feel blah, right? It's just something that is so common and it can be fixed. I work with this all the time. So why this matters, if you're looking at fat loss or fat loss resistance and you aren't able to lose the weight no matter what you do, this repeated spike and crash over and over and over just pushes the cortisol higher and higher. Cortisol raises your insulin, and then you are in this conservation mode. You're not going to be in fat burning mode. So this is why that contributes to that most frustrating symptom because of blood sugar dysregulation causing fat loss resistance. Okay, so we need to get that in check. Second common symptom I see is brain fog or poor focus, that kind of thing. Just can't pay attention to details. It's not as easy to do. So the brain relies heavily on glucose levels that are stable, not spiking and dropping. So the rapid rises and drops disrupt the neurotransmitter signaling, and that will interfere with your cognition, your brain chemicals, right? So the stress hormones that are produced from this causes that to happen. So this is where you can have trouble concentrating, you could forget things a lot of the time. You can feel like you're just out of control, that you're just like running around with a chicken with your head cut off. It's not just because you're hormonal, it's not just because you're menopausal. It is absolutely related to blood sugar dysfunction. So a lot of people might say, like, I know what I want to say, I just can't find the words, that type of thing. This is often improved. I see this all the time once your blood sugar stabilizes, even before the weight starts to change. All right, the third thing to talk about is anxiety. Everybody has anxiety. Everybody's being treated for anxiety, it seems. So this can happen, or irritability can be increased, especially between meals, because this is kind of like the first thing I said, where you have the energy crashes. It kind of correlates with that. We have a falling blood sugar, and this will, blood sugar, that triggers a stress response. So then you have a spike in cortisol and adrenaline again. That will raise your glucose again, and then your nervous system is just in fight or flight mode all the time. You can feel hangry, you can snap at people, you can have this racing thoughts and this inner tension. And it's not so much that it's emotional instability. That's what it looks like on the outside. It doesn't mean you need anti-anxiety medications, generally speaking. It doesn't mean you need to be on antidepressants. It means that your blood sugar is affecting this stress response. And so it comes out sideways as snapping and irritability, or that hangry feeling where you feel like you need to eat something ASAP or someone's going to get hurt, you need to get people out of the way. This is all because of blood sugar dysregulation. I've been working with this with people for years, and now we have tools that can look at things even more specifically, and we can catch things that happen or cause these symptoms before and after, a meal and that kind of thing. We can see it happening in real time, and it can be fixed. This isn't your normal. It doesn't have to stay this way. So I just want everybody to understand that these things are figure-outable, right? There's something that can be resolved. All right, so your intense cravings that you might have, especially around carbs, sugar, caffeine, and that kind of thing. Usually caffeine, not often, but usually it comes with a lot of sugar. This is your body seeking for a fast sugar check, right? It wants to correct the low blood sugar. It's causing, or what happens is insulin will overshoot the demand for the glucose, and it will cause you to dip. So what happens when you have those cravings and then you feed it, and then we overshoot the mark, we overreact to that level of glucose in the body, the insulin picks it up, and then what we have is this dopamine fix. This reward pathway becomes involved, right? So that's where that addiction and craving comes from. So this is where you might feel that urgent need for sweets or refined carbs, that urgent craving that feels non-negotiable, like there's no way you could talk yourself out of it. Or if you're just eating for relief, not really hunger, but you just feel like, okay, it's going to calm me down if I eat something. This is where willpower really won't work, right? People say, I just don't have willpower. That's because I'm eating these things. I'm eating these things I shouldn't eat because I don't have the willpower. When really it's about that these cravings are driven by the physiology that override the rational decision making, right? In your right mind, you're not going to eat something when you're not hungry that is actually detrimental to your health. But if you're not rational because your dopamine is in charge and your insulin is in charge and your glucose is in charge, that's going to be kind of a deal breaker. There's going to be no rationalization there, which is kind of crazy to think about. But like I said, it can be fixed. Here's the other super, super common thing, especially for women when they are going through hormonal fluctuations, is that there's poor sleep and they wake between, say, 2 to 3 a.m., kind of like the witching hours. We have like a 2 to 3 p.m. drop in energy, and then at 2 to 3 in the morning, we wake up like it's the start of our day. That's because the blood sugar will drop overnight, cortisol and adrenaline will rise to correct it. This triggers you to wake up. Then you just have this restless sleep. And it just is this vicious cycle too. People have a trouble getting out of it. It feels like you waking suddenly and then feeling alert, like really that you're about ready to start your day. You probably will struggle to go back to sleep. And you might struggle with nighttime anxiety or racing thoughts. A lot of people will describe it as they just cannot shut their brain off, and the hamsters are just running around on that little wheel, and people just cannot get back to sleep. So this is really important to get figured out, because the worse you sleep, the worse your insulin resistance becomes. Your insulin resistance causes more blood sugar swings, and this whole cycle is reinforced, and it's really hard to get off of that if you don't know what it is and you don't know how to fix it. So we can fix it with food and timing and nutrients and all those kinds of things. You don't have to just take more melatonin. You don't have to just take, like an actual sleep prescription. It is a lot more nuanced with that, and actually much better for you, because it's actually healing your body versus just covering it with a Band-Aid approach. All right. So if you have fatigue that doesn't improve with rest, it's because you are struggling to access a steady fuel source, because you have these boluses of nutrients in the form of glucose that are spiking, and that whole energy production becomes really inefficient. So then you have this chronic lethargy and fatigue all the time. And then you might sleep for 10 hours a night, but you're not restored. You might need stimulants to get through the day, like the caffeine and the sugar and whatever else. You will feel drained even on days that really aren't that stressful. Maybe even on your weekends when you're not at work, you might still feel absolutely exhausted. You cannot get out of the hole of feeling, terribly, terribly tired. So this is not really a rest problem. It's a fuel signaling problem. It's like your body doesn't even know what to do with the nutrients to provide the energy to your body, doesn't know what to do with those things. It just doesn't signal it properly. We need to address the blood sugar concerns in order to get this in check. This is one of the things that happens on a daily basis, or when I'm working with people on a daily basis, I see this, I hear this all the time. So difficulty losing fat despite effort. This is like the number one thing. People are so frustrated. Actually, so many of these things are number one things, but I would say most commonly I'm hearing issues with weight loss resistance and then the fatigue. Those are the top two. Everything else is like hovering right under, right? So they're very, very much, they all go together, it seems. So your best efforts, you might be eating super clean, you might be trying to do like keto or carnivore or vegan or something, more strict and restrictive, that you still don't get the results. Or you get the results for a little bit and then it levels off and then nothing works and then you gain the weight back super quick. This is usually because if you are having elevated insulin, and I know people say if they're on keto and carnivore that their insulin cannot possibly be high. For some people, that's not the case. It will block the fat breakdown. When you have elevated insulin, your breakdown of fats becomes blocked. Cortisol, the stress hormone, promotes the fat storage. So basically, your body is prioritizing survival over fat loss. It doesn't care if you lose fat. It wants you to survive, right? It's a compensatory mechanism. This is what our stress response and our stress management system is all about. So this can look like you're doing everything right. It can look like plateauing or regaining weight easily, like I just said. And it can look like that stubborn fat around the midsection, which again gets tied to a certain age. It gets tied to, well, I'm at that age where my hormones are changing, so this is just how it is. This is my new normal. And while, yes, that can be more exacerbated at that time of our lives, It doesn't have to be the rule. It doesn't have to be how it works for you. So weight loss resistance is basically a downstream effect. So when your blood sugar is unstable, your body is constantly in this correction mode. It's trying to compensate for everything that you're doing to it, and you don't even know it's happening. So it uses insulin and stress hormones to survive, and it will not let you release that fat. That really frustrating symptom, right? So weight loss resistance, let's be very clear about this. It is not a lack of discipline. It's not always about eating too much. I cannot tell you how many women I talk to that say, I'm just eating too much, I'm eating too many calories, and we go through, we find out they're eating about 1,100, 900, maybe 1,200 calories. That is not too much. They're not working hard enough or working out hard enough. Okay, more often it's this protective response to the unstable blood sugar pattern that you have and the stress signaling that is in your body to try to compensate for all of this stuff. So when we stabilize the blood sugar, fat loss often becomes a side effect. It's not so much of a fight anymore. So let's talk about how we can test for this. I know people have heard of like blood sugar checks with a finger sticking. That is a tool to use. You can look at your symptom pattern tracking. You can look at how your food and your energy responses are to those things. So we'll talk about those in a little bit more here. But then I want to get into what really actually helps and gives you a full picture in real time of what is actually working to support this blood sugar stabilization. So you could take a look. You can start doing this today. You can look at when you're eating, or when you have a snack, when you're having caffeine, when you're having sugar, like a sugary snack, or even a carby snack, something that turns into sugar. It doesn't have to be just actual sweet type of sugar. You can look at the timing of your symptoms. So if you eat lunch and it's like a high carb that turns into sugar type of meal, are you slumped with energy at 2 hours later? Do you have anxiety because you're already hungry? Do you have all those things? How does it affect your sleep? Look at the timing of when you eat, timing of your symptoms, what you're consuming, and put patterns together over time. So this can be a little tedious if you're not tracking everything and paying attention to all of these things, and you might not even be aware, because some of these symptoms might be normal to you because it's what you felt the last several years or several months. You might not identify them as something that needs to be looked at, and that could be a pattern that shows us you have blood sugar problems. All right, so make sure you are taking a look at that. Another thing is to think about, do you feel worse after healthy meals? So this is another thing you need to track and to pay attention to. Do you have energy crashes 1 to 2 hours after you eat, no matter what time of day it is, whether it's breakfast or lunch or dinner or snack? Do you need a snack to function? Are you one of those people like, I have to eat every 2 hours, or I feel like this, that, and the other thing? And if that sounds like you, that is a huge sign that you have some blood sugar dysregulation, even though you are not diagnosed diabetic. So like I mentioned, the finger stick for glucose testing, you can absolutely do this. It's affordable, it's accessible, it gives you some short-term insight. So it can tell you some things, but it can't tell you some other things. So let's walk through that. So finger stick testing is great for a spot check, right? It's spot check data, it's a point in time. It doesn't tell you what happens after a meal, like the level of changes after a meal in your blood sugar or anything like that, but it tells you like what is happening, after you eat something, before you eat it and after you eat it, so you can get an idea how you recover from a certain type of meal. So when it's used intentionally, it can reveal some meaningful patterns, like your fasting glucose. So right away in the morning, what is your morning blood sugar? Is it elevated? Is it unstable? Does it change day to day? That will give you a trend. So you'd have to do consistency with that every morning, same time, same conditions, and use the finger stick glucose monitor as it's directed, because there are specific ways you need to use it. You can look for an immediate food response. So you could eat something and 20 minutes into the meal, an hour after the meal, you can see what happens. Like, did your blood sugar spike? Did it drop? What happened after that meal? You can look at that post-reactive crashes, those post-meal crashes. So if you feel really shaky and anxious and groggy between 1 to 3 hours after eating, you can tie that into those glucose sticks that you would do after a meal. And then take a look at your stress responses. If you did like a hard, intense workout, check your blood sugar. Does it spike your blood sugar? And let's say you're doing a hot shower every night and that spikes your glucose. Yes, there are non-food things that spike your glucose. Maybe you need to not take the hot shower at night. Maybe take a cooler shower or take that hot shower in the morning so that you can sleep better, with your glucose better in control. So having these touch points of your spot checks of your data on the glucose monitor with a finger stick is going to be useful. But it's a snapshot. It's not like it's like the trailer, not the whole movie, basically, right? So it's something that gives you some data, but it's not showing everything. So here's what it can't tell you. There's some limitations of it, but like I said, it's a good, quick, easy, cheap way to do this and get an idea of how your body is responding. So what it doesn't show is your patterns over time, right? So usually if you check your blood at 10 a.m. and you ate a meal at 9:30, it's just telling you what your blood is like after, your glucose is like after half an hour after a meal. It's you interpreting the information, and the numbers from that is what is really important to do. But this doesn't do that. It just gives you that point in time. It doesn't show you what's happening between the meals you eat. It doesn't show you your pattern. And it doesn't really tell you exactly what your insulin levels are. Not everything does unless you get an actual insulin check. And that's not a standard lab, by the way. But it's really important to know. Rate of change, it doesn't tell you how fast you actually clear the glucose or process the glucose after a meal. You don't want to go too fast, but you don't want to go too slow either. So it doesn't show you that unless you're checking it every few minutes. No one's going to do that. No one has time to do that, and no one wants to stick their finger up that many times a day. It also isn't going to show you spikes that are driven by stress. And like I said earlier, if you tested it shortly after an intense workout, a hot shower, maybe a stressful event like a near miss, like a near miss of a car accident or something on the interstate, if you had your checker with you, you can see what happens there and see how stress drives your spikes. I'm not even sure if it'll catch it. I don't know the timing of it, but it's something that you would have to do that way. And you might have to sort of guess a little bit when to test or catch the problem. So there's not a lot of real-time data that tells you the patterns, right? That is the biggest problem with this. But again, for a point in time, it gives you some raw data from like the morning glucose, evening glucose, maybe 2 hours after a meal. Postprandial glucose is what they call it. So this is the exact reason why a lot of times people say, oh, your glucose looks fine, everything looks in control, everything is fine, but you still experience the fatigue, the cravings, you have that anxiety or that weight loss resistance. So this is why I do what I do, is like I'm always trying to figure out the patterns and the root causes of these things, not just cover it with a Band-Aid approach, right? We need to like have the information and then be able to solve it with actual detailed informative information, all right, informative data. So this is why in my programs I use a continuous glucose monitor, and you can use them even if you don't have diabetes. And the CGM, for short, for continuous glucose monitor, is great because it shows us the full pattern 24/7 while we're sleeping, while we're working out, whatever we're doing. It tells us exactly what is happening. We don't have to guess. We can see trends over time. We can see nighttime instability. We can see our stress responses. I've seen it on mine when I have been in hot yoga, for example. My blood sugar will start to spike. We can see how it is related to foods that we're eating, specific foods we're eating. We can even see it with medications. Like if you're taking um, hormones, or if you're taking, when you take your thyroid meds or whatever, you can see your blood sugar change and your blood sugar control over that time. Um, and you can also see, this is what's really interesting, even those healthy foods and those really clean eaters often have issues because there are foods that you would never expect to cause a blood sugar spike can actually cause a blood sugar spike. That just happens sometimes. It's not always what we think. For me, I learned that white potatoes, which have been demonized and said it's a bad carb and it always is going to mess with your blood sugar and it's going to keep you fat. White potatoes, for example, for me, don't cause a problem whatsoever. Okay? That may not be true for someone else, but something I thought for sure would cause a problem in my glucose levels actually didn't. All right? So even something I thought was unhealthy for me actually did not cause, the problem that I was led to believe just from, mainstream media or just kind of what we think about carbohydrates in general. So basically, what we need to understand is that the finger stick glucose testing is helpful kind of as a first step. It's really a good thing to see for points in time, but it rarely explains why the pattern and the symptoms persist. Okay, doesn't give you that snapshot. It only gives you the snapshot. It doesn't give you the whole picture. And it's an entry point, right? It's an entry point. It's definitely not the end point. So the CGM is way more useful because it shows those patterns. It reveals your overnight blood sugar swings. You're not going to wake up in the middle of the night to do a finger stick, right? You're not going to wake up to journal your symptoms or remember all of your symptoms while you were sleeping, because you're not going to feel all of them. You're not going to wake up to every single thing. So you're going to be able to see stress-related spikes. You're going to see hidden reactive lows. Like if you end up by overcompensating with insulin and you get a low blood sugar reading, you're going to see that and maybe what caused it. You're going to see individual food responses, right? It's going to give you all of the detail. And especially if you are someone who has hypothyroidism or you suspect you have issues with your thyroid, if you are perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, if you cannot get into those fat stores no matter what you do, this is something that can be especially powerful for you. I hear so many times people come to me, they're very, I call them, high nutrition IQ people. They actually know a lot about different foods and how they affect their body and that kind of thing, but sometimes they're not seeing the missing link with regard to glucose and the foods that they're eating. Sometimes those really clean foods that they're eating they're doing too much of it and maybe not realizing that they're causing some issues with their glucose. So that's why eating healthy isn't always enough, unfortunately. It would be really nice if we could eat a salad each day and feel amazing, but that's just not usually how that works, especially if you have any undiagnosed condition or are suspecting you have some kind of condition. If you are autoimmune, that kind of thing, we have to be a little bit more specific. So we need to understand that if you're having blood sugar dysregulation, no matter what you're eating, protein is probably going to be insufficient. Your meals are unbalanced, even if those meals are healthy or clean, actual individual foods. If they're unbalanced, it's not going to help your symptoms. If you have chronically high stress and your body is in fight or flight mode all the time, that's going to cause a problem. Or if your timing is off with your meals. If you chronically don't eat until 8 p.m. and then you go to bed at 10 p.m., that's going to cause a problem, and it can be remedied. It might be tricky with schedules sometimes, but it can be remedied. And there is a difference between eating healthy and eating clean than eating strategically for your physiology. So I see that a lot in my CGM programs. It's called the glucose reset. I see that a lot where one person in there can eat like a really high carb diet comparative to the other person and have the same readings, but it's about over time getting that interpretation of the real-time data and making changes accordingly versus just throwing spaghetti at the wall and having it, hoping it sticks. We need to actually figure out, but we need the data in order to do that, to make it customized and specific to the individual. So that's why I recommend a CGM. And what's great about it is that you can use it continuously for 2 weeks at a time. You can do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You can, adjust. You can take a break from it, because sometimes looking at all the numbers and being so specific about what you're eating all the time gets a little bit exhausting. So in order to manage stress there, keep blood sugar regulated in times of that stress, we need to have a customized plan for it. So that is what the glucose reset is all about. And if any of this resonated with you and you're trying to figure some of these symptoms out, if you have these lingering symptoms but everything comes back normal, then this is probably the thing for you. All right. I see a lot of great results with that, and we get in there and get really specific with your symptoms. It is pretty much life-changing, right? You finally get to know. So this month, I have my 3-month glucose reset on sale for $150 off. You get all of the real-time data. You get a clear structure and plan, guided interpretation for what your blood sugar is doing. And all of this will support your fat loss, your hormone balance, your energy production. You get all kinds of education inside the program as well as application, right? You're able to actually start with what you're learning and then just put it into play and make changes, and you'll see that change in real time because you're wearing the continuous glucose monitors, which are included. You get 3 months worth of them in this program. So if that is something that resonates with you, I highly, highly recommend you jump in with that. This is the best pricing I've had in this since I started this program. So I would jump in on that. And also we do 2 times a month trainings on this. And so you get all kinds of education inside this, and you can ask all kinds of questions, as well as look, have resources and have them available to you to look back at if you're not able to be there live. So they are great. It's a great resource for everybody that's gone through that. So comment glucose for the program. And if you are not someone who is ready to jump into that, but just would like to hop on a call and see what is the best fit for you, you can just comment call. All right, glucose for the program, and then comment call for the free call, and we can help place you in the right space that fits you and your needs. All right, so I hope this has been helpful. I hope that people aren't feeling this way, but unfortunately I know from my practice that this is how people feel. People are struggling. So this is kind of the first place I'd start. Rather than starting new this year with a new diet, start with data, right? Get actual data that will help you and help you feel better when you know how to adjust, right? If you have that real-time data, you can make changes, all right? So hopefully this has been helpful, and I'll be back next week with a topic on hormones. We're going to talk about hormones and see what we can do in there to help you balance those out with food and nutrients. But let me know in the comments, glucose or call. All right, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.